Why am I planting a black cherry tree? And why might you want to do the same? So that is the topic of today's video. And I want to talk a little bit about why we might want to include trees in general into the agricultural landscape, even if it's only on a small scale. And for the really large scale growers as well, may do well to benefit from a greater diversity of crops and crop types than what we're currently using today. So trees are a hardy perennial crop. They can be a lot more resistant to and resilient from many different types of extremes, right? Whether they be weather-induced, climactic, specifically drought, really hard and excessive rain, erosion. So these trees make the surrounding landscape a lot more resistant and resilient, right? They provide a windbreak and help control wind erosion and wind damage to other plants and crops. They provide shade in the heat of the summer, helping to reduce the effect of heat stress and drought. And these trees themselves are a lot more drought resistant as well. They have root systems that go much deeper into the ground, and these roots can inhabit a much wider scope, a much wider zone in the soil to take advantage of more water that would be available to them, especially if you're going to compare that to like a bean plant or a pea plant or, you know, a lettuce plant. The ability for the roots to take advantage of the water and the minerals are greatly reduced with the smaller root systems. So these trees help to balance that out. Their canopy can also prevent soil compaction due to rain damage by helping to soften the impact of a rainstorm or any type of intense summer storm that may take hold. The compaction caused by raindrops in a really heavy storm or windy storm can really be detrimental to the crops that you may be trying to grow. Depending on the type of farm or garden setup that you may have in place, livestock and animals may or may not be part of the equation, and if they are, various tree crops and hardy perennial plants like that can benefit in various ways, providing a food source, right? Either the low-hanging leaves and branches may provide a food source, or the fruit or the nuts that tree may produce may also be a very good and healthy, wholesome, seasonal food source for these animals. Additionally, these trees can also provide a sense of shade, a sense of protection from storms and the elements that various animals or grazing animals may like to take advantage of in some of the hottest times of summer. Here's a staghorn sumac tree, an early succession tree that I'm standing next to here. It's a native tree also. It could be a food source for various species of birds who like to eat the berries. Trees also allow you to take a much more full advantage of three-dimensional farming. So what do I mean by that? Essentially, if you can get plants and get your crops to take more of a full advantage of the vertical space available and those spaces in between, that makes you a lot more efficient and a lot more productive with what you can produce out of your garden or out of your farm. As opposed to a monoculture crop of corn, it's really only one-dimensional. It's only that plant that's being grown, and that's all the yield that you're going to get is only from that plant. You're taking that horizontal plane of farmland and you're planting one seed, whereas maybe a more traditional approach may have been to you plant the corn, beans, and squash, what we might know as the Three Sisters planting method, right? Where you take advantage of the vertical aspect in the corn that grows up, but also help to fill in that space in between with the beans that wrap around and grow around and up the corn plant, while the squash plant can crawl around the ground, finding the extra patches of sunlight and covering the ground, right, to help regulate the soil moisture and temperature. Adding trees and shrubs into your garden can allow you to take more advantage of symbiotic relationships, mutualism, at whatever scale you may be doing this. These trees can be used as a living trellis, much the same way a corn plant might be used as a living trellis to the bean. Another use for these trees is that they can be used as a form of rodent control. And that might sound kind of weird. So here is an already established black cherry tree that I had planted transplanted a couple of years back, and there's a hardy kiwi vine growing up it. It's kind of hard to see, but these trees can also be used as a form of rodent control. And it kind of sounds kind of weird because we know that deer can eat the branches of young saplings. We know that voles can chew around the base of the trees, eating the bark all the way around the base of the trunk and killing the tree. But these trees also have a balancing effect in that they can harbor, they can encourage a much more diverse range of wildlife in your area. Various raptors, birds of prey, depend on these natural areas that include different kinds of plants and trees especially to either roost in or perch on, so that they can scope out the surrounding landscape for hunting voles, mice, and other rodents. So it might be a thing of you want there to be tree cover and you want there to be some form of canopy that, and maybe you can prune or train certain trees to really more fully embody this type of role, right, where these large birds of prey can perch on in various areas of the garden, but you're not providing such dense shade and such dense branch growth that may be inhibiting these larger animals to take advantage of those spy towers to help them find their next meal. You might even be able to lash a piece of a horizontal tree branch that got cut off a different tree and lash it between a Y branch to provide a perch. Obviously you want to use bigger tree with bigger branches than this. Make sure it's a sturdy setup and you can help facilitate that process. For many recommendations, you might want to try to get it 15 or 16 feet up high of where these owls and hawks might be most comfortable to perch, but I've seen them perch lower occasionally, anywhere from 7 to 12 feet. You know, whatever capacity you have to take advantage of this. You know, even if you can only manage to put a perch up, 7 feet high, just do it. And these animals will work with what they have to make the best of it, if that's all you can afford. But it's better to do something than nothing. It's been stated that globally 50% of all raptor species have disappeared due to various activities that we participate in, right? The loss of habitat, right? Acres of cut grass, no trees in sight. Even for the average homeowner who may not own acres of land but may own half an acre or an acre of land, we may still complain about vole damage, but that landscape doesn't even necessarily support as many voles as it might need to in order to bring back these owl populations and these hawk populations. But if you have a garden, you may notice that the vole population may explode, right? Because the food source has increased dramatically, and that's not a bad thing, but you just want to make sure that you've also encouraged other animal species in creative ways to participate in your garden to help balance things out. And you never want to expect going into a garden, you can't think of it from a pure mathematical or chemistry based perspective, but understanding that you're never going to get a perfect yield with 100% of that revenue going to feed yourself. You are supporting an ecosystem, and we have to learn to share, to work with nature, understanding that we're not necessarily the center of it all. There's a line between pest pressure and pest outbreak, where the pest pressure has increased to such a point that it's gone out of control. And you have to always work with the edge of that and facilitate that process to keep that in balance. We're not trying to eliminate pests solely, right? But we're trying to produce abundance within this natural ecosystem. And so these raptor species are not just declining because of habitat loss, but also because of various poisons, right? Like rodenticides that we may use because we don't have the habitat for these large birds of prey. We have to take on that responsibility ourselves. If larger birds of prey then eat these contaminated carcasses, it can oftentimes kill them or hamper them in some way. Munition shrapnel that contains lead from hunting various animals or found in different areas of the landscape can also cause heavy metal poisoning or toxicity in some of these larger birds as well. Also, various forms of drugs or antibiotics that we may introduce into some of our cultivated livestock. Different animals in today's agriculture can also contaminate the food chain, leading to declining levels of predatory birds. So planting a tree allows us to advance into higher, more in-depth levels of succession. It's not just the annual agriculture that we need to work with, right? The shallower a plant's root systems are, the more likely it is for it to be much more severely affected by adverse conditions, drought, flooding, lack of available nutrients, and things like that. And if we want to secure our food source and our well-being for the future, to me, we really need to adopt and embrace more plants and trees that can take advantage of deeper soil zones where they can access stores of minerals and water, and they can hold themselves in the ground even when super intense storms may come from intensifying weather conditions. Because to me, how deeply rooted a crop's roots are in the soil is important, because those plants are not only supporting themselves, but are also supporting the society that planted them. So planting more trees and managing them and working with them in more creative ways enables us to take advantage of that stability, that durability, that sustainability that these trees, these larger forms of plant life, have to offer. So specifically, why would I pick a black cherry tree to plant in the garden? There are a wide variety of trees that we can plant for various reasons that we can get unique benefits from. Today I specifically chose the black cherry tree because it was already coming up on a particular area on the property, and that particular area was not really suitable to the long-term growth and well-being of that cherry tree. So I decided it would be a good idea to move it to a new location. So why not put it right in the garden? Going through the different benefits that I had talked about of why we might want to incorporate hardy perennials like trees and shrubs into the garden, I thought this would be a good opportunity to work with and to experiment with the black cherry tree in an agricultural scenario. So when talking about the black cherry, it's a native tree and a fruit-producing tree that is related to the apple, the peach, the plum, the pear, right? It's in the greater rose family. The black cherry tree is known for its timber, its wood that doesn't produce such copious amounts of smoke, because it's not quite as resinous as some of these other trees are. It's also a fantastic pollinator species, meaning that in the spring or in the summer, depending on the time of year, it sends out these flower spikes, and they attract various pollinators like butterflies, bees, wasps, and other insects that like to consume the pollen, and in doing so they transfer the pollen from one flower to another, and that's how the fruit is able to be produced. Now when these cherries are ripened and they mature, they're able to be eaten by various forms of wildlife, including different species of birds like the American robin, cedar waxwing, among many others. The fruit can also be edible for humans as well, just watch out for the pits. And don't expect the cherries to taste super sweet and delicious. They're going to be a little bit more on the astringent side, more than likely, and it's a wild variety, right? It's a wild type. So it hasn't been bred to contain such high amounts of fructose and other sugars that are present in the conventional cherries that many of us know and consume today. But they've still been used for many different things, and we can grow to accommodate and appreciate different types of flavors. You know, so many of us are so used to the sweet and salty tastes of our modern society, but there's a whole gamut of flavors out there, and undertones and overtones that we may do well to incorporate more into our diet. There are also many medicinal applications of this plant. Years ago, decades ago, it used to be a very popular additive to various forms of cough syrup. I can't remember specifically what part of the plant was used, but even today the flavorings for many cough syrups are actually still inspired by that black cherry bitter, astringent, almost sweet kind of flavor. Even though the plant is not popular for that use today as it was a long time ago, at least in the conventional sense or mainstream sense, but it was used for that purpose at one point in time, and it also has many other uses as well.